The storm hit just as Fallon Reese stepped out of the Seaside hotel, arms full of brochures, her sandal catching on a loose cobblestone right before the sky cracked open. "Whoa, hang on," said a deep voice behind her. A strong arm slid around her shoulders, pulling her under the wide canopy of a sleek black umbrella. The rain poured down like a broken dam, drenching the walkway in seconds, but Fallon stood dry beneath the umbrella, heart thudding louder than the thunder. She looked up. The man beside her was tall, sharp-jawed, and dressed in a charcoal gray suit that looked like it belonged in a Manhattan boardroom, not outside a beachside inn in Maine. His dark hair was only slightly damp, and his eyes were an intense steel blue that made her forget the cold rain completely. "Thanks," she said, catching her breath. "That storm came out of nowhere." "Yeah," he muttered, glancing at her with a quick nod. "You okay?" "Fine, just wet shoes and a bruised ego." He smiled, just slightly. "Better than a broken wrist. You always hang around hotel doors with umbrellas." She teased lightly, trying to ease the weird flutter in her chest. His jaw tightened like he wasn't used to small talk. "No, just bad timing, or good, depending on your perspective." She tilted her head. "Well, I'd call not being soaked a win." Just then, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. The driver leapt out and opened the back door. "Sir," the man beside her raised a hand. "1 second, Fallon blinked. "Wait, that's your car?" "Yeah." He glanced at the sky, then looked back at her. "You need a ride somewhere?" No, I'm staying here. I just stepped out to grab some flyers from the front desk for the art walk tomorrow." He nodded slowly, like he was filing that away. "You're an artist, gallery manager in Portland, but I paint too, mostly coastal stuff, watercolors." "Abstract?" He didn't say anything, but his eyes stayed on her face like he was actually listening. Like what she said mattered. She cleared her throat, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "Anyway, thanks again for the umbrella save. I'm Vaughn Ellis," she smiled. "Fallon Reese." They shook hands. His palm was warm, firm, not too firm, just enough to make her forget how wet her sandals were. "Nice to meet you, Fallon Reese," he said, her full name rolling off his tongue like it belonged to a song. "Nice to meet you too, Vaughn Ellis," she replied. He handed her the umbrella. "Keep it?" "Wait, what?" "It's just an umbrella." "It's clearly not just anything. That's probably a $100 umbrella," he shrugged. "Then it's overpaid. You'll need it tomorrow." Before she could argue, he slipped into the SUV and shut the door. She stood there, clutching the umbrella like it was made of gold, watching the car disappear down the coastal road. And for reasons she couldn't explain, her heart kept thudding like something important had just happened. The next morning, Fallon walked into the hotel café with her sketchbook under one arm and Vaughn's umbrella in the other. She ordered a coffee and planned to sit by the window, but froze when she saw him already there, sipping an espresso, reading something on his phone. In a different suit, navy this time, but still looking like he belonged in a Forbes cover story, he looked up and caught her eye. His mouth twitched. "I thought you left," she said as she approached. "I came back," he said. "Meeting got canceled." She hesitated. "Mind if I join you?" He nodded to the seat across. "Please," she sat, setting the umbrella between them. "You weren't kidding, it poured again last night. Told you." They sat in silence for a moment, the air between them oddly charged. "So, what do you do?" she asked. He glanced at her. "Real estate. Like selling, like owning," she blinked. "Oh," he sipped his espresso. "Hotels, resorts, some commercial buildings. I'm here to look at a property." Fallon choked on her coffee. "Wait, this hotel," he nodded once. "Potential acquisition." Her brain scrambled. "Seriously?" He leaned back. "Problem? No, it's just, I've been coming here since I was a kid. My dad used to bring me every summer." He studied her again. "Then it means something to you?" She nodded, surprised by how steady his gaze was. "Yeah, a lot, actually." He didn't look away. Noted. Over the next 2 days, Fallon kept running into Vaughn at the cafe, on the bluff trail behind the hotel, even at the gallery pop-up she helped organize in the old lighthouse. Each time, their conversations got a little longer, a little easier. "I'm not used to people like you," she said one night as they shared a bottle of wine on the terrace overlooking the ocean. "People like me?" he asked. "Confident, direct, expensive." He laughed under his breath. "You think I'm expensive?" "Vaughn, your watch probably costs more than my car." He looked at her, serious now. I wasn't trying to impress you, I know, she smiled. That's why I like you. He didn't respond right away, just looked at her like she'd surprised him. Then he said quietly, I like you too. The words hung in the space between them. Simple, honest, real, and maybe a little too fast, but she didn't care, because for the first time in a long time, Fallon felt something click into place, something that didn't feel rushed or fake or forced. It felt like something that could last. The next afternoon, she found him on the dock, staring out at the water. You're leaving, she said. I have to fly back to New York tonight. He turned to her. I didn't want to go without seeing you, she stepped closer. You could have just said goodbye yesterday. I didn't want it to be goodbye, her heart jumped. What does that mean? She asked softly. He took a breath. It means I want to see you again. I want to take you to dinner in the city. I want to show you what this, he gestured between them, could be. She stared at him. The storm, the umbrella, the late-night wine, the laughter, all of it crashing into her at once. Okay, she whispered. Yes, he smiled, and it transformed him. I'll send my plane, he said. She laughed. Of course you have a plane. You'll like it, he said. It's quiet, and I won't let you carry flyers in the rain ever again. She stepped into his arms, letting herself fall into the warmth of his chest, his scent, his breath. And for the first time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something real. Fallon adjusted the navy scarf around her neck as she stepped onto the private tarmac, the wind tugging at her curls and the scent of jet fuel sharp in the air. A uniformed attendant opened the door of the sleek silver plane, and she climbed the steps with a heart hammering louder than it had any right to. She'd never flown on anything smaller than a commercial airliner before, and certainly never on a private jet sent by a man whose last name she only learned 2 days ago. Inside, the cabin was polished wood, cream leather, and soft jazz humming from invisible speakers. Vaughn sat on one of the curved seats, legs crossed, reading a folder thick with documents. When he looked up, the intensity in his eyes made her forget the nerves entirely. You came, he said, standing as she stepped in. I said I would, she replied, setting down her bag. He nodded once, his gaze sweeping her face with quiet precision. You okay with flying? I'm okay with trying new things, she said, walking past him to the window seat. Besides, I've never had someone send a plane for me before. Figured I couldn't pass that up. He closed the file and set it aside. This won't be the last time, she glanced at him. Is that a promise or a threat, a prediction? She laughed softly, then looked out the window as the engine roared to life. The ground began to fall away, and suddenly the entire coast was a watercolor blur beneath them. An hour into the flight, he poured her a glass of something pale gold. Not champagne, but something sweeter, smoother. What is this? She asked, sipping. Sauternes. From a vineyard I invested in last year, she raised an eyebrow. Are you always this subtle about flexing your financial muscles? He met her gaze. I didn't bring you here to impress you. Then why did you bring me? His jaw shifted slightly. Because when I left that dock, it felt wrong. Like I was walking away from something I hadn't finished. Fallon set her glass down. And what exactly do you think this is? I don't know yet, he admitted, but I want to find out without distractions, without half-truths. She leaned back. That sounds dangerously close to honesty, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I've had enough of people pretending. The plane touched down in Teterboro just as the sky turned a moody violet. A black town car waited on the tarmac, and Fallon tried not to gape as they drove past rows of gleaming jets and into the pulsing lights of Manhattan. But what really stole her breath was the glass tower that rose above the city like a monument to power and precision. Vaughn's building. His name etched in silver across the marble lobby wall. She didn't speak as they rode the elevator to the penthouse, her heartbeat climbing with each floor. When the doors slid open, she stepped into a space that felt more like an art gallery than an apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, and a grand piano sat beneath a modern chandelier shaped like falling stars. The walls were lined with bold, abstract canvases, the kind that made you pause and feel before you thought. He tossed his keys into a crystal bowl and turned toward her. Hungry, starving, she said, still drinking in the view. Good. I had something prepared. She followed him through a wide hallway into a dining room that opened onto a terrace. A table for two sat beneath a canopy of fairy lights. The city stretched out below them, a million lights twinkling like a second sky. She blinked. "You did all this for me?" "No," he said. "I did it because I wanted to." "You just gave me a reason." They ate roasted halibut with lemon risotto, and Fallon tried not to lose herself completely in the way his voice shifted when he talked about building things, spaces, teams, opportunities. He didn't brag. He described. Like someone who saw the world in terms of what could be shaped, not what was already there. Halfway through dessert, she set down her fork. "All right, I've got to ask, why hotels? Of all things, why that?" His answer came slower this time. "Because they're temporary homes. For people running from something or toward something." She tilted her head. "And what are you running from?" He met her eyes. "That's the problem. I stopped running, but I never figured out how to stay." The words knocked something loose in her chest. She stood and crossed to the railing, the wind lifting a strand of hair from her cheek. Vaughn followed, standing close but not touching. The silence settled between them again, but this time it felt like something earned. "I don't know what you're expecting from me," she said quietly. "I'm not expecting anything," he replied. "I'm hoping," she turned to him. "For what?" "That you'll let me try," her breath hitched. "And if I can't promise anything?" "Then we take it one day at a time." The wind brushed between them, and for a long moment neither moved. Then, without warning, he reached into his pocket and handed her something small, wrapped in velvet. "What is this?" "Open it." Inside was a pendant, silver, shaped like a wave cresting. Simple, clean, beautiful. "Why?" "Because when I saw it, I thought of you." "Not because of the ocean," he added. "Because of the way you move through the world, quiet but powerful, like you don't realize the impact you leave behind." She stared at it, her throat tightening too fast to speak. "I'm not trying to buy your affection," he said. "I just wanted you to have something that reminded you this wasn't a dream." Fallon closed the box and held it tight. "Thank you." He nodded once, then looked out at the city, his expression unreadable, and for the first time since stepping into his world, Fallon realized she wasn't overwhelmed. She was intrigued, not by the wealth or the view or the glittering skyline, but by the man beside her, who built empires yet didn't know how to stay, and who, for reasons she couldn't explain, made her want to stop running too. Fallon stepped into Vaughn's office 2 days later, her boots damp from the February slush clinging to the Manhattan sidewalks. The receptionist had waved her through without hesitation, as if she'd already been added to some invisible list. The elevator had risen so fast her ears popped, and now she stood in a space that felt more like the command center of a luxury spacecraft than a corporate office. Floor-to-ceiling windows spanned the length of the top floor, and a vast minimalist desk stretched in front of them like a runway. But Vaughn wasn't behind it. He stood near a wall of glass cases, staring at something inside one of them, a vintage hotel room key, framed in gold. She stepped closer. "Is that from your first property?" He didn't turn. "No, it's from the hotel my parents used to take me to every summer." Before things fell apart, a silence settled between them, heavier than the air. Then he faced her fully, his expression unreadable. "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." "I changed my mind," she said. "I didn't want to wait." He nodded once, then gestured toward a door on the left. "Come on. I want to show you something." She followed him into a smaller room lined with models, scaled-down versions of buildings, each one lit from within. In the center stood a new one, still in progress. The base was pale stone, the top floors wrapped in curved glass. "This is what I'm building next," he said. "It's going on the waterfront in Boston." She circled the models slowly. "It's different. That's the point. I'm done with sterile. I want light, movement. I want people to feel something when they walk in." She glanced up. "What changed?" He met her eyes. "You." Her heartbeat stuttered. "I used to think control was the same as success," he said, "but the more I try to hold things still, the more I lose them." Fallon stepped toward him until they were only inches apart. "You haven't lost me." His jaw tightened slightly, but instead of answering, he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "What's this?" "Plane tickets, Portland, for both of us." She blinked. "You want to come with me? I want to see your gallery," he said. I want to understand what your world feels like. I've brought you into mine. It's time I step into yours. Fallon took the envelope, her fingers brushing his. It's not as glossy as all this. Perfect, he said. They flew out that evening, the plane humming low against a sky striped in navy and silver. Fallon leaned back in her seat, watching him read a file with a red tab at the top, his brow furrowed in thought. She reached across and gently closed the folder. Work will still be there tomorrow, she said. He looked at her for a long beat. Then he set the folder aside. When they landed, she drove them straight to her apartment above the bookstore in the old Port District. He didn't say a word about the cracked step leading to the door or the mismatched doorknob. Instead, he followed her inside and looked around like the place mattered. You live here alone? He asked. Yeah, it's small, but I like the light in the mornings. He ran a hand along the windowsill. You painted this yourself? I wanted it to feel like mine. He nodded slowly, then turned to the canvas propped against the wall. It was unfinished, just a wash of cobalt blues and streaks of white, but his eyes lingered on it like it was already complete. You see things I never notice, he said. You build things no one else dares to. The next morning, she brought him to her gallery, a narrow space tucked between a coffee shop and an old tailor's storefront. The front window was lined with student pieces, and inside, the walls were filled with paintings in all stages of boldness. She watched as Vaughn moved from piece to piece, studying each one with quiet focus. When he reached a moody seascape in charcoal and ink, he paused. This is yours, he said. She nodded. He looked at it again. You were angry when you painted this. Not angry, she said. Scared. It was after my father died. I thought I'd lose the gallery too. He turned to her. How did you keep it? I sold 3 pieces to a collector in Boston, paid 2 months of rent and slept on the floor. He looked at her like seeing her for the first time. You never told me that. You never asked. Outside, snow had begun to fall, thick, slow flakes that made the city feel suspended in time. Vaughn stepped to the door and looked out at the street. I don't want to leave, he said. You don't have to. I'm serious, Fallon. I want more than weekends and weather delays. I want to know what it looks like when this is real, every day. She crossed the room and stood beside him. Then stay. He turned to her, eyes dark and steady. I'll move the Boston project here. I'll base it out of Portland. I'll make it work. Her breath caught in her throat. That's a lot. It's not enough. His voice was low but certain. Not if it means being near you. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she leaned up and kissed him, slow, certain, and final, like a promise made without speaking. When they stepped back, she whispered, Then let's stop pretending this is temporary. He nodded once, and for the first time since she met him, she saw something settle behind his eyes, peace, not because he had all the answers, but because he'd finally stopped running. The wind skimmed across the rooftop garden of Vaughn's newly acquired waterfront building in Portland, where string lights dipped between trellises and white orchids trailed down polished stone columns. Fallon stood barefoot on the cool marble, a palette in one hand, a brush in the other, her fingers stained in shades of rust and sea glass green. She hadn't planned to paint that morning, but something about the sky gray but glowing had pulled her up here before the city stirred. You always work in silence? Vaughn asked, stepping out from the glass doors behind her. She didn't turn. I work in whatever the day gives me. He crossed to her, his Italian loafers soundless against the stone. The board approved the Portland shift. I signed the final documents this morning. Fallon turned this time. You're really doing it. I already did it. You didn't ask me if I wanted that. I didn't have to, he said. Not because I assumed, but because I knew you wouldn't ask me to stay, so I decided. She set her brush down. You were right, I wouldn't have asked. He studied her a moment. Are you angry? No, I'm relieved. She stepped closer. You made a choice, not for me, for yourself. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded invitation. There's a gala next week. My company's annual foundation event. Black tie, boring speeches, too much champagne. I want you there. She took the card. The raised lettering was crisp, formal. I don't own anything that fits in this kind of room. You'll have what you need, he said. But that's not why I want you there. Then why? Because this time, he said, I don't want to walk into that room alone. The gala unfolded inside the glass atrium of the Ellis Foundation's New Portland headquarters. The ceiling stretched like a cathedral of light, and Fallon felt the weight of every glance as she entered on Vaughn's arm, her deep sapphire gown trailing behind her like a tide. She ignored the curious stares, the whispers behind flutes of vintage champagne. Vaughn's hand never left the small of her back, steady and firm, as though anchoring her in a sea she hadn't learned to sail. An older man with silver hair and a cane approached them near the silent auction tables. "You've caused quite the stir, Vaughn." "Good," Vaughn said. "This city needed a shake." The man's eyes flicked to Fallon. "And this must be the reason you've suddenly grown a soul." Fallon extended her hand. "Fallon Reese, George Dempsey. I taught this one how to gut his first contract," Vaughn cut in. "George is retiring this year. But he's still the only person in the room who can outbid me without blinking," George chuckled. "Don't let him fool you, Miss Reese. He's always had a soul, he just kept it locked in a vault," Fallon smiled. "I think he misplaced the key." Later, after the speeches and the toasts and the awkward small talk had passed, Vaughn led her up a narrow staircase tucked behind the bar. At the top was a glass terrace no one else had found. Below them, the city glowed softly, the harbor lights dancing in the tide. He pulled a small velvet box from his coat and held it out. She stared at it. "Vaughn, don't panic. It's not what you think." Inside, nestled in velvet, was a silver key, not to a penthouse or an office, but to the studio she'd once shown him on the edge of the old port, the one she'd dreamed of turning into a second gallery space, but never thought she could afford. "You bought it," she whispered. "I didn't." He paused. "I signed it over to you, it's yours," she blinked. "Why would you do that?" "Because you gave me roots," he said. "And this city gave me clarity. The least I can do is give you space to grow." She closed the box and held it tightly. "You didn't have to do this." "I know." He stepped closer, "but I wanted to." She looked up at him. "You're not afraid anymore, are you?" He shook his head. "No, not of staying, not of building something slow and real." She took his hand. "Then let's build it together." He kissed her, not with urgency, but with something deep and steady, a promise in motion. The following weeks blurred into something both surreal and grounded. The studio opened with a soft launch, the first wall filled with emerging local artists. Vaughn attended in a navy sweater and jeans, a look so rare she teased him for days. He started hiring locally for the Boston-Portland project, choosing architects who walked the city instead of just studying its skyline. They spent their mornings in her apartment, their evenings on construction sites, and the nights in the kind of quiet only new love could make feel rich. One Sunday, as the sun dipped low over the harbor, Fallon sat beside him on a dock near the old lighthouse. Her head rested on his shoulder, and the only sound was the water lapping wood and the faint cry of gulls overhead. "I still think about that first day," she said. "If you hadn't stepped out of that car," he glanced down at her, "you'd have gotten wet." "I would have kept walking, probably never looked back, but I did," he said. "And I saw you," she smiled. "You didn't know I'd matter." "No," he said. "But I knew I didn't want you to disappear." She leaned in closer. "You didn't just shield me from the rain, Vaughn." He turned toward her, eyes soft and certain. "What else did I do?" She kissed him lightly, then whispered, "You gave me the sun after." Fallon stood barefoot in the center of her new gallery space, the morning light casting pale gold stripes across the hardwood floors. The scent of fresh paint still clung to the air, and half of the framed pieces leaned against the walls, waiting to be hung. Outside, the city stirred to life, but in here, there was only quiet progress, something earned, not rushed. Vaughn stepped through the open door, his blazer slung over his shoulder, tie undone, the first two buttons of his shirt open. She looked up from the measuring tape in her hand, raising an eyebrow. "You look like you just walked out of a GQ shoot," she said. "I had a breakfast meeting with the city council," he replied, walking over to her. "They've approved the garden rooftop for the Boston-Portland project. Construction starts in 2 weeks." She tilted her head, impressed. "You really are turning into a local." "I even drank drip coffee from a paper cup," he said. "I think that makes me a citizen." Fallon laughed and stepped back to assess the placement of a large canvas. "You're early, couldn't wait." He glanced around the space. You've done more in a week than most people do in a quarter. She wiped her hands on her apron, then leaned against the wall across from him. It doesn't feel real yet, like I'm still waiting for someone to walk in and tell me I've violated some zoning code. Not happening, Vaughn said. I made sure everything's airtight. You're not losing this place. I know that, she said, but knowing and believing aren't always the same thing. Vaughn walked to one of the covered canvases, hesitating just before reaching for the cloth. Can I? She nodded. He lifted the drape, revealing a deeply saturated oil painting layered in vivid crimson and deep indigo, the edges blurred like they were still moving. He stared at it for a long time, then looked back at her. This one's different. I painted it last night, she said. It's the first thing I've made in years that wasn't for sale. He turned back to the piece. What is it about? Fallon joined him, folding her arms. Letting go of the version of myself I used to protect. He didn't speak for a moment, then said, I did the same thing when I signed over the London expansion. Her eyes widened. You gave up London? I passed the reins, he clarified. I'll still be involved, but not like before. I'm not trying to be everywhere anymore, she studied him. That must have been hard. It was, he admitted. But nothing about that life felt like mine. Here does. They were quiet for a beat before Fallon spoke. You've changed. I had to, he said. You didn't fall for the version of me that hid behind corporate armor. You saw through it. She smiled softly. I didn't see through you, I saw you. That's different. He stepped closer, brushing his thumb gently across her cheekbone. I want this to be the place where we build something that lasts, not just the gallery or the project, us. I want that too, she whispered. Vaughn reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. I was going to wait, but I don't want to. She opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten lease, her name on the tenant line, his signature on the other, no rent, her brow furrowed. You said you weren't buying my affection. I'm not, he said, but I am investing in it, in you, in us. I want you to have full ownership in a year. No strings. She stared at the paper, her throat tightening. This is more than I asked for. It's less than you deserve, he replied, and I'm not doing it out of guilt. I'm doing it because building with you is the only thing that's made me feel like I've actually built something worth living in. She set the envelope on the table and stepped into him, her hands sliding around his waist. Are you sure you're ready for forever? She asked. His voice was steady. I've been ready since the moment you handed me back that umbrella. Fallon kissed him, slow and deep, as light spilled through the windows, catching the curve of his jaw, the edge of her smile, the quiet certainty in both of them that this wasn't just a moment, it was the foundation of everything they hadn't realized they wanted. 6 months later, the gallery's first full exhibit launched to a packed crowd and critical acclaim. Local artists flew in from across the coast, and Fallon stood beside Vaughn in a black silk dress, her hair in soft waves, as she introduced each piece like she was unveiling a secret. After the final toast, Vaughn led her through the back exit, where a vintage car waited beneath a canopy of string lights. She looked at him, confused. Where are we going? He opened the door with a small smile. Somewhere that reminds us where this started. The car wound along the coast, the city dimming behind them until they pulled up to the old Seaside hotel where they first met. It had been fully restored, clean white shutters, fresh paint, a new sign that read, The Reese Ellis Inn. She turned to him in stunned silence. You bought it, she said quietly. Not just me, he replied. We did. Together. Fallon walked up the steps, her sandals clicking against the worn stone path, and turned back to see Vaughn watching her like she was still the most unexpected thing that had ever happened to him. Inside, the lobby had been transformed into a warm coastal retreat, modern touches woven through the old bones of the place. A small art room had been added to the east wing, and a gallery wall now held a single painting, the watercolor she'd done the night of their first kiss. She turned to him, eyes bright. You remembered everything? I never forgot, he said. They spent the night in the corner suite with the windows open and the sea breeze curling through the curtains. In the quiet between laughter and shared stories, Fallon rested her head against Vaughn's chest and listened to the one sound that never changed his heartbeat, steady and sure. In the morning, sunlight spilled across the bed, and the world outside was still. Vaughn reached over and laced his fingers with hers. "You know," he said quietly, "I thought I was building an empire, but I was just waiting for my home to find me." Fallon smiled, her voice still husky with sleep. "And now," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple, "I have everything." They stayed not just for the weekend, but for the life they'd both spent years searching for. And in every room they filled, every space they restored, every quiet morning they shared, they built something that neither time nor distance could ever take away. Together, they made forever feel like the most natural thing in the world.